C'est bien une voiture, hein?
It was situations like this that I was so persistent in using an engine that had an as low a compression ratio as possible for this trip. Fuel quality is more than questionable when you find yourself in weird countries across the world, and Tunisia was no exception. If you are in big cities like Tunis, for example, Monastir, and so forth, there are proper gas stations like the ones we're used to. The further out and south you go towards the desert, a gas station is a fellow with plenty of bottles of gasoline all around him, sitting outside of your shop, having coffee and a smoke, and you just buy as many as you possibly need. Surprisingly, the actual quality of the fuel is pretty good. The only problem with using gasoline from bottles in random gas stations, so to call them, was dirt. But other than that, Bob ran just fine. All that was left was to see how I managed to get a fuel consumption of 5 or 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers throughout the trip. Now that fuel quality and availability is out of the way, I decided to run an episode on my fuel consumption and how I actually got there. And this all started from a comment or a question I got on my channel a few episodes ago from one of my viewers, Stefan. So, Stefan, this episode is basically for you. So I'll be walking you through what I've done to my SU carburetor and how I've actually managed to achieve fuel consumption that ranged from 5 liters per 100 kilometers to 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And I'll walk you through my thinking and everything I've done. First things first. It's very important for an SU HS4 and for it to work properly that the damper on the carburetor is in as good of a state as possible. Now this one is a brand new one that I replaced right before I left for my trip, and this works like a shock absorber, moving up and down. Actually this is stationary, and the dashboard piston moves up and down, and it works as a shock absorber, making sure that the piston will not be flying up and down like crazy. So to show you what I mean, I'll just get the dashboard cover out. Stay. So this is the dashboard piston, and this one moves up and down as air flows into the carburetor, and this tube up here, which you need to top up with oil and frequently check it, this is basically where this damper goes in, and as the piston tries to move up, this one will restrict the flow of oil and try and manage how fast that thing moves. Now if your damper, let me just carefully place that back in place. Now the outer surface of the damper needs to be as shiny and spotless as possible, and what you need to look for are big dents or scratches or grooves, or maybe even pitting if it's a very old one. That would basically make oil travel much faster along the sides, and it would not give you the dampening necessary for the carburetor. So it's a small detail, but it's an important detail. So make sure this is in a good state. The dashboard piston. This is basically your main, let's say, check valve, a variable one, which controls the airflow that goes into the engine, and at the same time, as the piston moves up and air moves this way, the needle that's in the jet will basically control how much fuel gets sucked into your engine. It's also very important that this is clean. if you get debris, dust, sand, anything, it will obstruct the movement of this piston, and it could actually make it get stuck. If you get dirt in here, you will basically mess up your carburetor big time, and if this is worn, you toss it and you need to find another one. So I make sure I keep this super clean. So every 5,000 kilometers, I would stop, open the carb up, and inspect it. And if you know there's any dirt to the touch, I would give it a quick spray. I very often check the level, though you don't really often need to top it up. It doesn't consume much. But in case you need to, what I've done is I have a small syringe here in the engine bay, so I can top up my oil in the dashpot if I need to. These two things out of the way. Now, choice of needle. The needles on an SU HS4 come with markings, and their markings mean something. They're not just there for fun or for show. I bring with me, I basically travel with three main needles, all of which are of a type A something. A basically denotes the diameter of the jet through which the needle will be operating, and if it's an A-type needle, you need to have an A-type jet, and the A-type is for small bore engines, either an 850 or a 997 or a 998. Type A jets will even work for 1098 and so forth. But if you have a 1275 Mini, then you need a B-type jet and a B-type needle, so that's important. The needle I have with me right now is the standard needle for the SU HS4 as per the 1976 Rover Mini manual. What I do have with me is an ABX, and the ABX is the standard needle also as per the manual. So apparently Austin gave you different standard needles depending on the year, but what I found was that the ABX, which is, and this is important actually, I forgot to mention, the letters have a meaning. So an ABX means that A is an A-type jet. Now as the letters progress through the alphabet, you get a linear setup as you move along. So for example, a triple A will basically give you the same rich mixture all the way through the RPM range. If you go with an ABX, just like this one, it means that in the low to medium range, B is what characterizes the flow of fuel, and that's actually a rich setup. But X, which is all the way towards the end of the alphabet, will give you a very lean setup, and that's for higher RPM. That's cruising with basically the maximum fuel efficiency you could possibly get. The ABX needle is the one that gave me 5 liters per 100 kilometers, and sometimes it even went as low as 4.7 or 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers, which is a very, very good fuel consumption. The downside to that, and there's always a downside or a compromise, is that performance is affected, right? And of course, less fuel goes in, less power will go out. So the ABX was perfect for saving up fuel, but the moment you start climbing up mountains and stuff, my fourth gear was basically non-existent. So though it's not my preferred and standard choice on Bob, ABX stays there because if I actually manage to make it to Central Asia, like I'm planning to, Kazakhstan would be the perfect country for this needle because it just steps. It's an endless straight line, nothing happening there for most of the country. So I would be switching to an ABX, so I keep that with me. The needle I have now is the ADE, which gives me a very, very good, let's say, it's the best of both worlds from what I've seen so far on Bob. And it gives me a very decent fuel consumption, 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers, and it gives me decent performance as well. So Bob pulls pretty well, even going up mountains, up hills, and so forth. What I also found was that the third needle that I have, and I also keep with me, this is the AEG, So it's a needle that will give you a linear setup than what the standard on the manual is. Now what I realized was that the AEG will make Bob perform pretty darn well. The downside to that is it consumes a little bit more. So if I use the AEG, my consumption ranges around 5.8 liters to 6, but it performs much better. So if I would be going continuously up hills and I got plenty of mountainous terrain for miles and miles and miles ahead of me, it would be worth the trouble to switch to that because it would be easier for me to go up there. So 3 different needles that I keep with me, and depending on the terrain, I may or may not resort to them. One thing that I found that affected my performance as well and my fuel consumption is the springs that go on an SU HS4 carburetor. Now by default, SU HS4 carburetors came with a little spring that goes on the center of the piston like that, and as the piston moves up and down, the spring will just bring it down again and will try to control its movement. Now these springs come in different color denominations, right? You would have a blue spot spring, a red spot, a green, a yellow, and so forth. And different colors are different stiffnesses for the spring. Now the standard is usually a red one, which is this one, and the carburetor and the manual states that your carb should have one spring just like that, and that was the original design. What I've done is I'm combining 2 springs, because what I found is that for my engine setup, though my tune-ups are small, they're not insignificant. My exhaust rim flow valves, the higher lift rocker arms that I'm using, and so forth, have changed the way the engine behaves. So I found that if I use 2 springs, and mind you, when you place springs like that, 2 of them concentrically, you basically add up their stiffness. So now I'm operating on how the carb would perform on a yellow spring. So I'm adding basically 2 red ones, and I make up almost 1 yellow in stiffness. So it takes much more force now for this piston to move up because I got 2 springs holding it down. The reason why I'm sticking to this and I didn't just buy a yellow one and be done with it is that if I need to, say I'm in Kyrgyzstan, say I'm in wherever, I'm pretty far high up. My engine is a naturally aspired engine, so it's designed to work under atmospheric pressure conditions anywhere from sea level to roughly about 1 kilometer up. From then on, you need to reset your carburetor for it to perform and behave properly. So what I can do, taking advantage of this setup, is if need be, I will be removing one of the 2, and my spring, my piston will be able to move upwards easier and hence draw in much more air. Mind you, the further up you go, the thinner the air gets. So you got to do the best that you can to let as much air as possible into the engine. So I'll be removing 1. The reason I'll be removing the inner one and not the outer one, as I've explained in a previous episode, is I don't want my dashboard piston to be able to do this movement. This spring will hold it in place, moving up and down vertically, which is the downside of this design, is that it will still move up and down, but because the spring sits on the inner diameter, the piston has the tendency to do that, and it will wear out. So this combination with 2 red springs and an ADE type needle right now gives me 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers of a very, very decent performance on an A series standard engine with disc pistons, a standard cylinder head, the CAM 4810 with the small valves, and it's basically a very, very decent setup that I have right now. It's very easy to go haywire on the setup of a carburetor on a classic Mini, and I've seen Minis consume up to 10, 11, 12 liters per 100 kilometers which is exorbitant, and I want to make sure I consume as less as possible for my trip. In getting the proper fuel consumption out of your classic Mini, and trust me in saying that it can be a very cheap car to run, certain things must apply before you actually try and set up and fine-tune an SU carb. Your ignition timing must be spot on, and for this engine it's 7 degrees before top dead center, and it's checked and set. Your valves must be set properly, and what you also got to ensure before you even attempt to tune an SU HS4 is that you have no air leaks anywhere in your system, because that's going to mess up your attempts to try and optimize fuel mixture. If all of that checks, then it's pretty straightforward to tune an SU HS4. And how I learned to do that kind of stuff, of course a lot of trial and error, but had it not been for John Twist and University Motors and his wonderful videos out there, I would have never gained the knowledge that I have on classic Minis, and specifically on SU HS4 carburetors. This guy is absolutely amazing. I presume for all of us who know him and his work and his videos, he's more or less a legend. And the video I used to learn how to actually tune my carburetor is provided in the description below. So check him out. It's a great guy, and he does an amazing job on all British cars. His tutorial on SU HS4s is absolutely great and pretty straightforward. That's all for now. One more video down, plenty more to go. Thank you all very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you in the next episode of the Mini Diaries pretty soon. Take care of your fantastic selves and do motor on.